In 1993, a dinosaur movie asked a question we still can't answer. Not can we build it? We answered that one already. We always answer that one. The question underneath, the one five people argue about over lunch while the animals breathe outside the window, that's the one that should keep us all up at night. Just because we can, should we? Let's pull it apart. I'm Eddie, and this is Eddie P at the Movies, where we figure out how movies are built and what they're actually about. So we're just going to do a quick recap of the story of Jurassic Park and then jump into the themes of the film. So in Jurassic Park, a billionaire named John Hammond finds a way to bring dinosaurs back to life. He has a bunch of men digging for mosquitoes trapped in amber. The mosquitoes have dinosaur blood stuck in their bodies. Then some fancy scientists extract the blood. They use super science techniques to patch the holes in the dinosaur DNA with a little frog DNA, and voila, animals that have been gone for 65 million years are now brought back to life. And our billionaire, Mr. John Hammond, he builds a theme park on an island off the coast of Costa Rica to house these mythic beasts. But before he can open the theme park, his investors, well, they get a little bit nervous. So he brings in a team of experts to sign off on the park. A paleontologist named Alan Grant, a paleobotanist named Ellie Sattler, and a mathematician, or as he calls himself, a K-itician, named Ian Malcolm. They arrive at the island and they witness the impossible. They're only a stone's throw away from real living dinosaurs, and for about 10 minutes it's the single greatest thing any human being has ever built. But then the power goes out, the electric fences go down, and the animals escape. And then the park, which is designed to sell wonder to its guests, well, it turns into a place where guests are the main course for dinner. Everyone who survives the island getaway, well, they agree on one thing. This place should never have existed. That's the plot. That's your 30,000 foot view. However, the plot is not the point of this movie. The point, or the real center of the story, revolves around a lunch that the guests have before everything goes to hell. Because that's the moment the movie stops being about dinosaurs and starts being about us, as in human beings. Jurassic Park is a 2-hour argument about one question, and it might be the most important question in all of science. Not could we, but should we? So, without further ado, I've always wanted to say this. Welcome to Jurassic Park. So here's the thing most people miss about this film. The scariest, or at least the most confronting scene in this film, it doesn't have a dinosaur in it. It's 5 adults sitting at a table eating Chilean sea bass while they have one of the most important discussions in human history.
Gee, the lack of humility before nature that's being displayed here staggers me.
Well, thank you, Dr. Malcolm, but I think things are a little bit different than you and I had feared.
Yeah, I know. They're a lot worse.
Now, wait a second. Now, we haven't even seen the
No,
part
no,
where
no,
you
no,
feel...
don't let him talk. There's no reason. No, I want to hear a review point. I really do.
Yeah, don't you see the danger, John, inherent in what you're doing here? Genetic power is the most awesome force the planet's ever seen, but you wield it like a kid that's found his dad's gun.
It's hardly appropriate to start hurling generalizations.
If I may, I'll tell you the problem with the scientific power that you're using here. It didn't require any discipline to attain it. You know, you read what others had done, and you took the next step. You didn't earn the knowledge for yourselves, so you don't take any responsibility for it. You stood on the shoulders of geniuses to accomplish something as fast as you could, and before you even knew what you had, you patented it and packaged it and slapped it on a plastic lunchbox, and now you're selling it. You're going to sell it. Well,
I don't think you're giving us our due credit. Our scientists have done things which nobody's ever done before.
yeah, but your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should.
Condors. Condors are on the verge of extinction. And if I was to if I was to create a flock of condors on this island, you wouldn't have anything to say.
No, hold on. This isn't some species that was obliterated by deforestation or the building of a dam. Dinosaurs had their shot, and nature selected them for extinction.
I simply don't understand this Luddite attitude, especially from a scientist. How can we stand in the light of discovery and not act?
Oh, what's so great about discovery? It's a violent, penetrative act that scars what it explores, what you call discovery. I call the rape of the natural world.
Fantastic. So now that we've all rewatched the scene, we can not only break the scene down, but use it to let us guide us through what the film is actually saying to us as the audience. So Hammond has just shown these people a miracle, and he's expecting applause. But instead, Ian Malcolm, the mathematician, or K-itician, the one sitting in the black leather jacket, who's roughly 30 to 40% rock star, 30 to 40% scientist, and the rest is just playboy. But anyway, he says the truest thing anybody says in the entire movie. Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should. So just read that again, because that sentence is doing a lot more work than every dinosaur in the film combined. Malcolm isn't saying the science is wrong. He's saying that being able to do something and then being right in doing it are two completely different questions. And we, as a species, are extremely good at the first one and almost criminally lazy about the second. But of course, Hammond fires back. He says condors are nearly extinct, and if I brought those back, you would be applauding me. So how is a dinosaur any different? But Malcolm doesn't blink. He says these are not animals that we lost to the building of a dam or something of that nature. These are animals that nature selected for extinction. They had their shot. This isn't conservation. This is really about a man who's deciding he gets a vote on a choice that evolution already made. And then he lands one of the funniest and also most accurate lines in the movie. You're wielding genetic power like a kid who found his dad's gun. And there's the tragedy of the whole film in one line, because no one at the table is really listening, especially John Hammond, because no one ever listens. The lawyer is already counting the money he thinks the park's gonna make in the future. The scientist, Mr. Wu, he's not at the table, but he's very much part of the film. Well, he's so proud of his work, he's probably rehearsing his Nobel Prize speech in his head. And Hammond, well, he's still dreaming, probably of a future attraction on the island or the next dinosaur that'll be awe-inspiring to the park's visitors. Malcolm's the only one asking the question. And for his trouble, he comes within an inch of meeting his maker. If this video is the kind of thing you want to see more of, you know what to do. And here's where it stops being a fun thought experiment and where it gets a little cold in the room. When this movie came out in 1993, the question of should we, well, it was still borderline science fiction. You could walk out of the theater, feel the shiver that the movie gave you, but you could also tell yourself that it's just a monster movie. No one's really gonna go dig up a mosquito and then find the blood and then grow a dinosaur. But the real world has a habit of catching up. Cloning stopped being science fiction in 1996, when a sheep named Dolly was copied. Gene editing was still decades off back then, except decades have a way of showing up quite quickly. Because here in 2026, dire wolves are alive and well after being extinct for at least 10,000 years. And there's serious talk about scientists bringing back the woolly mammoth, along with a whole line of other creatures from eons past just waiting their turn. We now face a future where the ideas of Jurassic Park, well, they don't seem far-fetched at all. So that shiver used to be able to shrug off after watching this film, well, we can't do that anymore, because we already ran this experiment for real, with something a lot more dangerous than a lizard. Listen to the man who built the atomic bomb. When Robert Oppenheimer was testifying in 1954, explaining how the Manhattan Project happened, he said, "When you see something that is technically sweet, you go ahead and do it." He went on to say, you can only argue about whether you should after you've already succeeded, after the thing exists, after it's too late to unknow it or to undo it. And that's really Ian Malcolm's line. However, this is said by a real person, meaning Dr. Oppenheimer, about a real weapon, 40 years before the movie Jurassic Park was even made. The scientist's job is can, but it doesn't seem like anybody has the job of should. And the problem with that is that no one ever takes culpability. It gets passed around the room like a football. Was it the president? No, it was the generals. No, it was the scientist. And we're only driven by people who ask can. We never even bother with should. And just to make sure we're not telling a half story with Dr. Oppenheimer, the man who led the Manhattan Project, he did say,
"We knew the world would not be the same. Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, I suppose we all thought that, one way or another.
This was after watching the first successful nuclear test, which was codenamed Trinity, on July 16th, 1945. So there is hope that we can all have moments of introspection, but what happens when those moments are too late? Okay, now one thing before we press on about the direwolf living in modern times. It's actually really a gray wolf, which has been gene edited to look the part, and scientists are already arguing about whether or not this really counts as the real direwolf, which in itself is the most Jurassic Park sentence I can imagine. We can now build something that looks exactly like the miracle. And the fight about whether the miracle is real, well, that's what persists. And of course, Mr. Hammond, well, he would recognize that argument instantly. The movie isn't a warning about the future anymore. It's really a documentary about the present. Now, I'm gonna argue against myself for a moment, or at least I should say present a counter narrative or a counterpoint of view. So when I was in high school, I had this long conversation about this topic with my physics teacher. He was a really brilliant guy, but his position was clean and very confident. He said to me that research, as in any research on any topic, is good, always, full stop. Knowledge is never the problem. What you do with it might be, but finding it out never is. And his defense was really simple, but it went like this. For over 1,000 years, most of Europe survived on the most basic grain, porridge. So basically morning, noon, and night, that's all people were eating. And he asked me, imagine if that's your whole life. Every meal is just porridge or something akin to it. Would you enjoy that? And it's an obvious no. So his point is really about discovery, it's about curiosity, and it's about the concept that people refuse to accept the porridge they're eating. And if you do that, well, then it ends up getting you everything worth having, at least at the dinner table. And honestly, I'm not sure that he proved what he thought he proved, because the idea of is life better with or without more porridge, it's not really the same claim as is there such thing as any discovery that we'd be better off not making? To me, those are different sentences, and I think he's smuggling one behind the other. But I want you to sit with this concept for a moment longer, because if we pivot to, say, Dr. Grant in Jurassic Park, well, he of all people, he wants these animals to exist more than anyone, at least on that island, if not the world. Grant's the guy who insists that these dinosaurs are now birds or have evolved into birds, and nobody else is really buying the idea. Now, evolution aside, no matter how majestic we find a turkey or a peacock, Dr. Grant still wants to see a T-Rex in the flesh. He spent his entire life digging in the dirt, just imagining these creatures, dreaming of how they move, what they sounded like, how they smelled. And he's still the first one to say, this might be a mistake. So the question isn't, is curiosity good? Curiosity may be the single greatest trait that human beings possess. The question is whether curiosity comes with a brake pedal. And so far historically, well, it hasn't. Okay, so let's just say for the moment that the people in John Hammond's camp have won the argument. That the people who so believe this in the marrow of their bones, they managed to look Ian Malcolm in the eye and say to him, yes, we should, it's worth it. And they also managed to convince Dr. Malcolm that this is the case. Well, it doesn't really matter, because if the answer is yes, you still don't get to play God. Because God, in air quotes here, implies control. And control is the lie at the center of this entire film. If you think the God versus man thing is me projecting, the movie says it out loud. At the beginning of the tour of the park, Malcolm runs the entire chain for us, beat by beat.
God creates dinosaurs. God destroys dinosaurs. God creates man. Man destroys God. Man creates dinosaurs.
And this is not some sloppy film school reading. That's the script telling you exactly what this is all about. The second man brings things back from the dead. He's not doing science anymore. He's applying for God's job. And Ellie, it's funny, it's charming, it's great. She caps it off really dryly and she says,
dinosaurs eat man. Woman inherits the earth.
And this movie, Jurassic Park, it doesn't just say control's a fantasy. It actually shows you the animals proving it before the humans really catch on. Muldoon, the game warden himself, explains how the raptors hit the electric fence. They never hit the same spot twice. They're testing every section of the fence for weaknesses, methodically, and remembering what they've learned. These creatures are running experiments in their own cage. That's not a jump scare, that's intelligence outgrowing its container. And by the time Muldoon realizes they've been hunting him for the entire picture, all he manages to say is, Now, the fence was never the thing really keeping them in. It was just time, and time was on their side. And if you watch what everyone believes, Hammond believes he's in control because he built the electric fences and he signed a bunch of paychecks. The geneticists believe they're in control because they've made every animal in Jurassic Park a female. So they assume there's no breeding, no surprises. The lawyers believe they're in control because the insurance has been paid. And every single one of them is wrong because you can't control a complex system. You can't predict what life does once it's on the loose. Malcolm has a name for it. Chaos, but the movie gives you the line everyone remembers. Life finds a way. The dinosaurs breed, the all-female park manages to produce babies, and the one thing that was mathematically impossible, well, it happens because complexity doesn't care about a spreadsheet. And the film is honest enough to make the biggest dreamer say it out loud. Late in the movie, a broken man trying to maintain a facade of grace and confidence, Hammond sits with Dr. Ellie Sattler as they're eating melting ice cream in an empty restaurant. And he starts talking about the next time, and Ellie stops him cold. You never had control. That's the illusion. And that's the whole thing. Playing God was never on the table. The most you can ever do is start something and then hold on and pray. Man doesn't get to be God because God implies you're driving. Nobody in this movie is driving. They're all just passengers who paid for the ride. And if you want to see and understand how Spielberg makes you physically feel that loss of control, well, we're going to unpack this in great detail in our craft video on Jurassic Park. Even thinking about it right now, I can picture the ripples in that plastic cup of water. All right, so this brings us to the last question, which is perhaps the most difficult one about human beings. If the warning not to pursue the risky technology goes back many, many years, and the answer is you can't control it anyway, then why do we keep building, quote unquote, the bomb, or the disease, or in this case, the island full of dinosaurs, every single time? Well, I keep coming back to this line I really love. Satisfaction is the death of desire. The moment you get the thing, you stop wanting the thing, and you start wanting the next thing. That's not really a flaw in Hammond. That's sort of the engine of our entire species. It's why we're not still living in caves fighting off predators in the dark. The only reason our species has come this far is because we're descended from a long line of people who looked at the impossible and said, I'm going to do it anyway. And this is why the movie is way smarter than a lecture. It refuses to make Hammond a villain. A lesser film hands you a greedy corporate monster and lets you off the hook with, well, I'm not greedy, so this movie's not about me. But Spielberg won't let you do that. Hammond isn't greedy. He's a grandfather. He genuinely wants to give the whole world a gift. If you watch his face at the reveal, he's not looking at the dinosaur. He's looking at Grant's reaction. He's drinking in someone else's wonder. That's not a con man. That's love. Which is exactly what makes him so dangerous. Because the tragedy of John Hammond isn't that he dreamed too big. It's that he dreamed big and never built the scaffolding underneath his dream to support its weight. He spent a fortune on genetics, on helicopters and gates and those fancy driverless cars. And then he hired one guy to run the security for the entire park. That's not ambition. That's negligence wearing ambition's clothing. And if you want to give the negligence a proper name, well, it's Dennis Nedry. And for those of you Seinfeld fans out there...
Hello, Newman. Hello, Jerry.
So the entire security system on an island full of apex predators, every fence, every lock, every door, it runs through one underpaid, overworked, quietly furious computer programmer. Hammond treats him like a line item on a budget that needs to be schooled instead of a man who's holding the keys to the entire kingdom. So, when a competitor slides him a bag full of cash, he happily switches off all the security systems on the island without a single bit of hesitation. The dinosaurs didn't break out of Jurassic Park. A payroll grudge let them out. Hammond spent $100 million on the miracle and pennies guarding it from the one man who could undo the entire thing. So the villain of Jurassic Park, well, if it has to be a person, I guess you could say it's Dennis Nedry, but upon a deeper viewing, the real villain of the film is not a person. It's really a personality type. And you've got it. I've got it. Every dreamer, every builder, every founder who ever said, we'll figure out the safety part later. The movie isn't pointing at Hammond. It's pointing at the thing in all of us that wants the miracle more than it wants to ask if we can survive the miracle. So, with all that in view, does the movie tell us to stop? No. And that's what makes this great instead of preachy. It doesn't say don't dream. Grant, the man who questioned all of it, still ends the film with 2 kids asleep on his chest. He's changed, he's softened. He's a better man now for what the island has cost him. The wonder was real. The brachiosaur was worth the tears. And the movie actually says 2 things, and you gotta hold on to both of them. 1, could is not should. Being able to do a thing is the beginning of the conversation, not the end of it, and we keep treating it like the end. And the second thing, perhaps the scarier one, even if you should doesn't buy you control. You can be right, you can be careful, you can be well-funded, you can even be humble, but life will still find a way. It will find a way through a gap you didn't even know was there. Wonder and warning in the same breath. That's Jurassic Park. It hands you the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, and then it very calmly reminds you that the moment you try to own the beautiful thing, well, it ends up owning you. And this film could not have landed a more beautiful ending. One that isn't just pretty, but it sits in a complete service to everything the film has been saying. Here's what most people who've seen the film don't know. Alan Grant is based on a few people, but in large part on a paleontologist named Jack Horner, the primary inspiration for the character and the man who advised on every one of the Jurassic Park films. Now, Horner has spent his entire career as one of the loudest champions of a single thought, that modern birds aren't just related to dinosaurs, but that they are dinosaurs. And Grant carries that thesis throughout the entire film. So from the first scene at the dig site, he's the guy insisting these animals became birds, and nobody really buys it. Then the film ends and quietly proves him right. Because the last shot, we have the survivors in the helicopter, they're pulling away from the island, and Grant is looking out the window at a flock of pelicans gliding over the ocean. And that image is carrying 3 things all at once. The first is a callback to that lunch towards the beginning of the film, when Hammond waved condors in Malcolm's face just to justify himself, when he said, if I want to bring back a flock of condors, you wouldn't have anything to say. And 2 hours later, well, the movie answers him. Not with condors, but with pelicans. Ordinary wild birds that nobody engineered. Nobody caged them, nobody argued over them while they fly free over the manufactured miracle that lies beneath them all. The second thing is the freedom itself. These birds have no fences, they have no island, they have no control room, and no one is debating whether or not they're allowed to exist. Everything that John Hammond tried to build and cage and own, these pelicans just have it for free, just by being alive. And the third thing is the thing that gets me every time. Those pelicans aren't a reminder of the dinosaurs. They are the dinosaurs. The one branch of them that lived through the asteroid 65 million years ago. They grew feathers and they flew away. So when Grant watches them go, life finds a way, stops being a warning about a park and becomes the literal truth of the entire planet. The dinosaurs never really died. Some of them just learned to fly. And there they are. Out the window, exactly where they've been the whole time. I hope that hits you the way it hits me. So I'd love to hear from you out there in the comments. If there's a discovery you honestly believe we'd be better off never making, or you think my physics teacher is right and all knowledge is worth having no matter the cost, drop a line in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. And while you're at it, let me know what film you'd like me to break down next. I love to hear from all you fabulous cinephiles out there. I'm Eddie P. Remember, show, don't tell. I will see you all next time.